Let us consider the morphology of a glaciated landscape. So, how a landscape appears when it is glaciated during the time that glaciers are existing on that particular landscape. Now, as we have discussed before, that we have two basic types of glaciers. Glaciers that are unconstrained by the topography and glaciers that are constrained by the topography. Now, these glaciers, they are also known as the continental glaciers, and the glaciers that are constrained by topography are basically alpine or mountain glaciers. So the continental glaciers include ice sheets, ice caps, and ice shelves. The glaciers that exist on mountains are constrained by topography, and the glaciers that exist on flat areas in the polar regions, they are unconstrained by topography. If you see the cross section of the, let us say, Greenland ice sheet, you can see that at the margin, if you look at the bedrock of the Greenland ice sheet, then it is slightly depressed and at the center, and it may be even below sea level at some places. What can be seen over here is that the maximum thickness of ice is somewhere in the center or close to the center, and the thickness of ice at the margins over here and over here, this is less as compared to the thickness in the center. The movement of ice is away from the central portion towards the peripheral regions. So, if it was controlled by topography, the ice should have flown from the higher mountains over here towards the interior, but it is not the case. So it means that topography is not controlling the flow of glaciers in this ice sheet. Same is the case for Antarctic ice sheet. Now, as I have discussed before, there are two types of continental glaciers: ice sheets and ice caps. Ice shelves are basically parts of ice sheets and ice caps that are floating in the ocean or in a water body. And the difference is basically of size that I have already discussed. Now, within these ice sheets, means earlier it was thought that these are simply blankets of ice over the continents, and the ice sheet is, it was assumed that this whole mass of ice is moving, simply it is moving away from the central portion where maximum snowfall or maximum rate of accumulation of snow is observed, and from this portion, because there is a lot of snowfall over here, and this portion becomes higher in elevation by the deposition of snow, and because of the pressure of the overlying ice, the ice radiates out from this portion towards the peripheral regions of the ice sheet. This was the older view of the ice sheets, regarding the ice sheets. But now we know that the movement of ice within the ice sheets is not that simple. Rather, what we know now is that, let us say this is the Antarctic ice sheet, the Antarctic Peninsula, something like this. And what you can see here is that there are several regions from where the ice is radiating. So the regions where the ice is radiating outwards, these regions are known as domes. These are known as ice domes. So there may be one dome over here, another dome, let us say over here, another dome is, let us say, over here, and the ice is moving out in all directions from these domes. Now, the movement of ice outwards from these domes is simply not in the form of a moving sheet of ice, rather it is in the form of moving channels of ice. These are fast moving channels of ice, and they are arranged in a very dendritic, or you can say branching form, the manner in which this ice is coming out from the domes. This is somewhat like this. There are branches, and this ice is coming, ultimately it is coming out from these domes. So what we can see over here is that ice is moving very fast in these channels. So these are known as ice streams. They are analogous to valley glaciers, but the difference between ice stream and valley glacier is that the ice stream is bounded by ice itself. Means the moving material is also ice, and the bounding material is also ice. In the case of valley glaciers, which are present in the mountains, the moving material is ice, but the bounding material is rock, bedrock, on the bottom as well as on the sides. Then there are ice divides. So just as we have divides between different fluvial basins, similarly we have divides between the different ice sheds. So just as we have watersheds, we can have ice sheds here. So this can be the domain of this particular, something like this. So this is the ice dome, this is another ice dome, this is another ice dome, and the ice will migrate outwards from these domes, and this migration will be facilitated by movement along the ice streams. And sometimes wherever these ice sheet encounters mountains like the trans-Antarctic mountains, now the ice tends to move through these mountains along gaps. There are gaps in all, so these ice streams, they take advantage of these low-lying areas in the ranges, mountain ranges, and they tend to come out through these ranges to the coastal areas. They behave as valley glaciers, similar to valley glaciers, and here they are known as, not as valley glaciers, but they are known over here as outlet glaciers. Ice shelves, these are the floating parts of ice sheets or caps. The interesting thing about ice shelves is that, so let us say this is a continental glacier or an ice sheet, but when this ice sheet approaches the peripheral regions, its thickness decreases. The ice sheet in Antarctica, it may be at the maximum, it may be 4 kilometers, but in the outer portion, in the peripheral portions, its thickness may come down to 500 meters. Now, those parts of the ice sheet that are floating in the ocean. So this is water and this is the sea level. What you can see over here is that base of the ice sheet is below the sea level, from here to here. This is not always the case, but this is possible that the portions of ice sheet, they are lying below, their base is lying below the sea level. Now, what is important or what is interesting over here is that the junction or the point where the ice sheet begins to float. So up to this point, you can see, up to this point the ice sheet is in contact with the bedrock directly, but beyond this point, beneath the ice, there is oceanic water. So this point, this is known as grounding line. This is basically a line because if you see in the third dimension, if we see the ice sheet in the third dimension, then this will be in the form of a line. So this portion, we will say that this is the ice shelf, floating part, and here is the sheet that is in contact with the ground. Now, because this ice shelf is floating in the ocean, it will be affected by tides when the sea level rises. Because of the buoyancy, this ice will tend to rise, and when the sea level falls, the ice will tend to move down. So this part is free, this part of the ice shelf is free to move, so it can move, but this part is not free, so there will be a lot of stress in this part of the ice shelf, and sometimes this leads to the breaking of the ice shelf at this point. There is another possibility that because of rapid melting of ice, the ice becomes thin. If this ice becomes thin, then the grounding line will move towards the continent side. Now the grounding line is at present it is here, but because of the thinning of the ice sheet, At some point of time it may be here. So now the grounding line is over here. The grounding line has shifted. Now coming to the alpine or mountain glaciers, let us get familiar with certain terms. So ice fields, these are level ice surface topography in mountain regions. For example, the North Patagonian ice field. The term may look similar, may sound similar to ice caps and ice sheets, and actually they appear to be similar. They also appear to be similar to ice caps because the topography is level. Although the underlying topography is very steep, the surface topography is level almost, but the underlying topography is steep and rugged and steep terrain is present. Now the basic difference between ice fields and ice caps is that these are unconstrained by topography. Here they are constrained by topography because these ice fields are present in mountain regions. So therefore the flow of ice is controlled by the topographic surface, not by the thickness of the ice. I have given you the example, the North Patagonian ice field. Just to demonstrate the difference, make it more clear, let us say that we have a mountain range like this. Under normal conditions, when the rate of accumulation of snow is not very high, we can see the development of glaciers in the valleys like this. And these glaciers are moving along the valleys and cutting down the valleys and making the valleys broader and U-shape, all those things. But consider the situation when the rate of accumulation of snow is very high, rate of accumulation, formation of ice is very high. What will happen is that ultimately this whole mountain range will be covered by ice. Now here you can see very clearly that the movement will still be controlled by the topography. Means the ice will move from higher elevation to lower elevation, which is not the case in the case of ice caps and ice sheets. So that is the basic difference between fields and caps. Coming to valley glaciers, now these are very common. Most of you will be familiar with the valley glaciers because whenever we encounter this word glacier, we make a picture in our mind that it is a valley glacier moving from the mountains. So these are valley glaciers that are bounded by valley walls, and they usually originate in a cirque glacier. It is in the upstream portion of a valley glacier, armchair shaped hollows are present. Let me discuss this cirque glacier first. So this is a glacial peak that is known as horn, and these are arrays, and so there is an arm-shaped hollow at the base of peaks, and they are heads of valley glaciers. That the valley glaciers begin as cirque glaciers. Valley glaciers can also have their origin in the ice sheets. As I have told you that in ice sheet at the peripheral regions we have, let's say, mountain ranges, and the ice sheet has to pass through those mountains. So the ice in the ice sheets will be channeled through the valleys within the coastal or within the mountains, forming the valley glaciers or outlet glaciers. So neck glaciers are basically deposits of ice that are present within hollows and gullies in the north-facing slope in the northern hemisphere. So why north-facing slope? Because as I have discussed in the previous video that in the northern hemisphere the north-facing slopes will be colder as compared to the south-facing slopes. That is why the chances of accumulation of snow and formation of glaciers in the north-facing slope will be greater than the south-facing slopes, and snow will persist in the gullies and hollows because they are depressed areas. This snow will convert into ice gradually, and neck glaciers will form. These are very small glaciers, and they may be the precursors of cirque glaciers. In a non-glaciated landscape, if because of climate change, the accumulation of snow starts or begins to happen, it will initially take place, the accumulation of snow will take place in the hollows and gullies in the north facing slopes. Eventually this will develop into cirque glaciers, because these deposits the ice will corrode, or it will abrade at the base and enlarge these hollows and gullies, and ultimately it will develop into cirque glaciers. Cirque glaciers will ultimately flow down into valley glaciers. And Timo glaciers are basically they are similar to alluvial, or they are analogous to alluvial fans, just as the rivers coming down the mountains, they drop their sediments at the foot of the mountains and form these deposits, that is the alluvial fans. In the same way, the valley glaciers that are coming out of mountains, this is the mountain front, and this is one valley glacier, this is another valley glacier. When these valley glaciers emerge onto the plains, they unite, they combine and produce a Piedmont glacier. The word Piedmont actually means, this is P means foot, Mont is mountain. The glaciers that are present at the foot of the mountains, it is the Piedmont glaciers, and the velocity, the ice movement is very very slow in these Piedmont glaciers. Now let us have a look at the glacial crevasses. These are large fissures on ice surface, and they represent bedrock undulations. Wherever the bedrock is undulating, these undulations will be reflected in the form of glacial crevasses on the ice surface. Because as I have discussed, and especially these crevasses are present especially when this is a cirque and this is a valley, glacial valley, that this is a longitudinal profile, glacial peak. Here we have the cirque glacier, and at the point where the cirque glacier joins the valley glacier, there is a protrusion in the bedrock. So here there is a hollow at this location. This is armchair shaped hollow, and this is a cirque glacier, and here you have the valley glacier. Now at this junction there are large crevasses are present, and the glacier descends down into the valley after these crevasses. And wherever there is an undulation within the valley profile, this is reflected in the form of crevasses on the top of the ice surface. Because as I have told you earlier that the ice at the bottom, it is deforming by creep. So this is basically a plastic kind of deformation, but the surface ice is brittle, and this brittle ice cannot deform plastically, so it breaks and forms crevasses. There is a very large crevasse at the beginning of the cirque glacier, and this crevasse is known as Bergschrund, because when the ice in the cirque glacier moves downstream, moves downwards, so this whole glacier ice is detached from the bedrock in the head region, and this leads to the formation of a large fissure that is known as the Bergschrund. Now, what are the different methods or mechanisms of glacial erosion? So glaciers can erode by abrasion, by crushing and fracturing, and joint block removal. This is also known as plucking or quarrying of the glaciers. Now, abrasion involves the scratching, grooving and polishing by the glacial debris. So the abrasion is basically done by the glacial debris, that is the loose material present within the glaciers. That loose material that actively abrades the bedrock and the valley walls by scratching by grooving and by polishing the bed. Scratching, grooving and polishing. Now the abrasion will be more common in worm based glaciers, and joint block removal or plugging or quarrying is more common in cold based glaciers, because in cold based glaciers the ice is more tightly bound to the bedrock, and because of this tight coupling between ice and bedrock, joint blocks they are removed or plugged or quarried by the glacial ice. So this is more common in cold based glaciers. And the glacial debris, the action of scratching, grooving and polishing, this is more common in warm based glaciers, because to some extent they will be involving sliding of the glacial ice. So the glacial ice will slide, and it will, in the process, it will scratch, groove and polish the bedrock surface. Glacial transport. Now the debris or the loose material or the glacial sediment may be transported within the glacial ice. It is said to be N-glacial debris. This is supraglacial and this is subglacial debris. Now the glacial debris may be acquired by the glacier itself, by, as I have told before, by the processes of plugging or quarrying and by the processes of fracturing. But a major part of the debris is acquired by avalanches and rock falls in the glacial valleys. Apart from this, there can be debris flows as well, and these debris flows may spread out over the glacial surface, making it look dirty. But gradually this dirty material or this debris flow material, rock fall, this will be incorporated within the glacier ice. It will move inside the glacier ice or on the sides, or it may even on the surface. Now coming to the glacial landforms. So the glacial landforms can be divided into erosional and depositional landforms. Erosional landforms can be further classified as abrasional landforms, abrasional plus rock fracture landforms, and residual landforms. And depositional landforms can be again classified as the landforms that are deposited directly from glacier ice and that are deposited from melt water that is coming out of the glacier. These are also known as glaciofluvial landforms. And then there are proglacial landforms. Now coming to the abrasional landforms, abrasion creates large regions of glacial scar. These are known as scarred regions. So vast regions in Canada, Siberia, these have been affected by the scarring action of the continental ice sheets during the Pleistocene period, Pleistocene times, and this generates now and late topography. So you can say this is kind of hummocky terrain, and the drainage pattern that develops in these regions is known as deranged drainage, because the landscape that emerges out from the base of a continental ice sheet, this is very undulating, it is very hummocky, so it will take some time for the drainage to become arranged in the form of a dendritic or some other kind of drainage. Glacial trough. This is basically a long, narrow depression or valley created by the scarring action of glacier. So these glacial troughs they may be represented as glacial valleys or fjords. Fjords are the drowned portion of the glaciated valleys in the coastal regions, especially in Norway. Fjords are formed at higher latitudes. They are not formed at lower latitudes in the tropical and subtropical regions, because in these tropical subtropical regions the glaciers don't come to the sea level. These glacial valleys are U-shaped in contrast to the V shape of the fluvial valleys. Longitudinal profile of a glacial valley is irregular because at different places there will be waterfalls and there will be steps. The longitudinal profile of a glacial valley is non-graded, and the valley junctions are discordant. That is, the tributaries, the glacial tributaries join the main glacial valleys. That is the hanging valleys. Hanging valleys are basically the valleys that have been carved by tributary glaciers these hanging valleys, their floor lies well above the floor of the main glacial valley. So they appear to be hanging above the glacial valleys. And this is a discordance that the tributary glacier is joining the valley glacier at a very higher level. That is, the elevation of the hanging valley is far above the elevation of the glacial valley. This is the discordant valley junctions. Waterfalls are present and truncated spurs are also present. So this is a post glacial landscape where the glacier, the main valley glacier as well as the hanging valley glaciers have all vanished. Now you can see this is the glacial trough. This is the glacial trough or valley glacier, or you can say glacial valley, glacial trough or valley. And now there may be a river may be flowing now at present. Small river may be flowing through this glacial trough. These are the valleys that are left behind by the tributary glaciers, and these are known as hanging valleys. Now you can see here that the elevation of the hanging valley floors is far higher than the elevation of the main valley floor. So there is a discordance. This discordance is not found in fluvial valleys. In fluvial valleys, the tributary floors, when the tributary rivers, when they join the main river, their valleys have this almost same elevation as compared to the elevation of the main valley floor. So there is a, you can say, concordance, and in the case of glacial valleys, there is a discordance, because the strength or the erosive power of tributary glaciers is far less than the erosive power of the main glacier. So these are different hanging valleys that contain tributary glaciers. And what else we can see here is that there are truncated spurs. Now we have to come to the residual landforms, but because I have drawn the diagram over here, let me explain some of the things, some of the residual landforms that are. So this is a horn, this is known as the glacial peak, horn or glacial peak. And these are the ridges, these are sharp ridges, and these ridges are known as arides. So glacial ridges are very sharp because these ridges are created by plucking off bedrock on both the sides of the ridge by glacial ice. Therefore, the rocky material, this undermines the basal part of the slope, and the top portions, they fall down as rockfall, and these ridges become extremely rugged and extremely sharp. And these sharp ridges are known as arides. Similarly, in the fluvial landscape, there are peaks, and these peaks develop cirque glaciers on 3 or 4 sides, and these cirque glaciers start eating into this peak and making the peak sharper and higher. So these are glacial peaks or horns. Now coming to the third type of aboriginal landforms that are created by the aboriginal activity. These are domes and whalebacks. Then there may be streamlined hills, and there may be rock drumlins. The glacial abrasion will also produce striations, bedrock striations, and grooves. So striations and grooves are basically small linear depressions within the bedrock surface that were carved by the movement of ice. Now striations are smaller as compared to the grooves. Striations may be up to a meter long, and usually they are less than a meter, and grooves are larger than 1 meter. They may landforms produced by abrasion and rock fracture. These include cirques and toss and lee forms. Now cirques are basically armchair shaped hollows that they form in mountainous terrain that we have already discussed, but the mechanism of the formation of cirque involves abrasion as well as rock fracture, because as you can see in this diagram that when the glacial ice is deposited or there is a the glacial ice is present in this armchair shaped hollow, valley glacier, cirque, glacier. Now this glacial ice, it abrades over here at the bottom. The process taking place at the bottom is abrasion, and the process taking place on the sides or the head of the cirque is fracturing and plugging. Fracturing over here, because fracturing or plugging, because the ice is moving outward, downwards, and this will take away, it will query or plug the loose rock that is present, while that has been weathered by frost action. This will be taken out, and in this way the cirques will develop. After the glacial ice has gone, we can see an armchair shaped like hollow, and this may contain a small lake known as quarry or tarn, or simply cirque lake. There are many names in different parts of the world. Now let us come to stoss and lee forms. These include rocces, moutonnees, flickbergs, crag and tail features. Rocces, moutonnees are less than 100 meters in dimension. Flickbergs are greater than 100 meters in dimensions. Now these forms, they indicate the movement of ice, direction of ice movement. So rocces, moutonnees and flickbergs, basically they are the same thing but the difference of size. So this is the stoss side, and this is the lee side. That is, lee side means it is shadowed by the flow of glacial ice. So the glacial ice is present over this. So if the thickness of ice may be, let us say, this is the ice surface over here. So ice is moving. On this side it will abrade, and on this side it will pluck or query the joint blocks. Okay, so in the case of stoss and lee forms, there is a stoss side and there is a lee side. This is the direction of movement of ice. Abrasion takes place on the stoss side and plucking takes place on the lee side. Because of enhanced pressure on the stoss side, melting of ice takes place at the bottom, and thin film of water forms at the interface between bedrock and ice. This facilitates the sliding of ice on the stoss side. Sliding of ice on the stoss sides here leads to abrasion. The debris, the glacial debris that is entrained in the ice, because of the basal sliding, this debris abrades the surface of the rock on the stoss side, and on the lee side, because the pressure drops, so the water that has melted over here, it refreezes, and this refreezing, this leads to the plucking of joint blocks, and this leads to a rugged appearance on the lee side. Now coming to the crag and tail features. Crag refers to a resistant rock outcrop that protrudes beneath the ice sheet or beneath the glacier, and this is the movement of the ice. This is crag, and on the lee side of the crag, the glacial debris that is still is deposited in the shadow of the crag tail. So crag is composed of bedrock, which is resistant. Tail is composed of glacial tail. So this will also indicate the direction of movement of ice. All the toss and lee forms, they indicate the direction of movement of ice. Residual landforms: arids, pool, horn, nugget. So arid is basically a sharp glacial ridge which has got cirques on both the sides. So these cirques have eaten away on both the sides, and horns are formed when a mountain peak is eroded by cirques on 3 or 4 or more sides. And new nuggets are either mountain tops, or you can say the whole mountain ranges. They are exposed, they are jutting out, or they are protruding out of the ice sheets and ice caps. For example, a number of nunatics protrude out of the Antarctic ice sheet in the trans-Antarctic mountains region. Now coming to the glacial depositional landforms. As I have previously discussed, they may be classified as the landforms deposited directly from the glacial ice or indirectly from glacial meltwater. These are also known as glaciofluvial landforms. Now, glacial debris can be divided into supraglacial, subglacial, and ice margin. So, consequently, supraglacial debris that leads to the formation of supraglacial landforms, subglacial debris forms subglacial landforms, and ice margin debris forms ice margin landforms. Supraglacial debris includes lateral and medial moraines. They also include shear or thrust moraines, and this also includes erratics and dirt cones. Now, lateral and medial moraines, they are parallel to the flow of ice. Shear or thrust moraines, they form perpendicular to the flow of ice. And erratics and dirt cones do not have any relationship with the direction of flow of ice. Now, lateral moraines are derived from the glacial debris that is transported within and above the glacier on the sides of the glacier. So this is the debris that is transported at the margins of the glaciers or close to the glacial valley walls. Now, this material is derived from the rock falls, from avalanches, from debris flows that is taking place on the mountains adjacent to the glacier. The medial moraine, it is similar to the lateral moraine, but it is derived by the lateral moraines from two valley glaciers unite. They give rise to a medial moraine in the resultant valley glacier. Shear or thrust moraines, they correspond to the glacial debris that is trapped in thrusts that develop within the glacial ice, and this debris is transported from the base of the glacier to the top along these thrusts present within the glacial ice. Erratics are small and large boulders that are dispersed by the moving glacial ice. Now, the subglacial landforms include ground moraines, drumlins, and drumlin fields. So, ground moraines are sheets of glacial till, that is the glacial debris that is angular. Let me tell you over here that the till is basically loose, angular, poorly sorted glacial sediment. And tillite is lithified till. When the glacial sediment or the glacial till is lithified, is converted into rock, a sedimentary rock, then it is known as tillite. So, all these moraines, whether it is lateral moraine, medial moraine, shear or thrust moraine, whether it is ground moraine, or whether it is drumlin, all these features or all these landforms, they consist of glacial till. So, ground moraines are basically sheets of glacial till. These sheets are not uniformly thick. They may be thick in some places and they may be very thin in other places. So, ground moraines are undulating, they are quite hummocky, and they do not have any relationship with the movement of ice. Just as lateral and medial moraines, they are parallel, and shear or thrust moraines are perpendicular, ground moraines do not have any relationship with the movement of ice. But drumlins and drumlin fields do have a relationship with the ice movement, and they are very effective indicators of the movement of ice sheets and ice caps under which they form. Let me remind you once again that all these landforms, whether it is drumlin, ground moraine or shear or thrust or lateral medial moraine, whatever it is, these landforms are visible once ice has vanished, the ice has gone. Because during the time when ice is, or the glacial ice is existing, and the glaciers are present in a landscape, at that time these drumlins and drumlin fields and ground moraines and thrust moraines and lateral and medial moraines, they will all be present under the ice or within the ice. So their appearance will not be similar to what they will appear after the deglaciation period, after the deglaciation. Now drumlins are elongated depositional features. They are elongated regions, and they may be 2 to 50 meters high, 10 meters to 20 kilometers long. They are oval, egg-shaped or cigar-shaped in outline, and usually drumlins are found in groups, and these groups are known as drumlin fields. Now at the margin of the ice, we have terminal moraines and recessional moraines. Terminal moraines are the dumps of glacial till at the snout of a glacier, at the end of a glacier where the glacier is terminating, and the existence of terminal moraine is indicating that the glacial snout has been stable at that particular location for some time. Because if the glacial snout is continuously receding, then the formation of a terminal moraine may not take place. Rather, the hummocky ground moraine will be present in such a case. But when the glacial snout becomes stable at a particular location, for many it can become stable for many reasons, then we find the production of terminal moraine. Recessional moraines are found behind the terminal moraines. During the glacial recession, the snout became stabilized at one or two locations where these recessional moraines have formed. But the terminal and recessional moraines, especially the recessional moraines, their preservation may not be very good, because when the ice sheet or glacier advances during a phase of glacier advance, then these recessional moraines may be destroyed. Even the terminal moraines may be destroyed, and only those terminal or only those end moraines will be preserved that have the farthest extent. Now both these terminal moraines as well as the recessional moraines, they are perpendicular to the flow of ice, just like shear or thrust moraines. Now coming to the glaciofluvial landforms. Now these are the landforms that are produced by the action of melt water that is derived from the terminal part of the glacier, that is melting. Now this melting may start within a glacier quite upstream of the glacial snout. It may appear that all the melting is concentrated at the glacial snout, but actually melting is taking place far upstream of the glacial snout, and this meltwater is moving out from the glacier in the form of subglacial streams, and there are subglacial tunnels that are present beneath the glacier. These tunnels are quite sinuous, just like we have rivers on the landscape. So these subglacial channels, they are also quite sinuous, and they are also branching in nature, and either they can produce subglacial channels and they can also produce eskers. Now as I have told that these subglacial meltwater streams, if the sediment load is less under the glacier, then in that situation subglacial channels may be formed under the glacier. Means the substrate of the glacier, beneath the glacier, that may be glacial sediments or that may be bedrock. So channels, subglacial channels are carved in that bedrock or in that glacial sediment, and these channels may be filled with silt, clay or gravel or even peat in the subglacial environment close to the glacial snout. The glacier is having a lot of debris, and in that case where a lot of debris is present in the terminal part of the glacier, the subglacial streams, they will have enhanced deposition of glacial debris. This will lead to the formation of eskers. Now this material, the glacial sediment, will build up in these channels, and it will lead to the formation of elevated ridges. So a pictorial, I am going to give you a pictorial representation of these subglacial channels and eskers in this diagram. So this is the situation during glaciation. So this is ice, bedrock. Now this is the situation at the time when the ice is covering the landscape. So you can see this is the valley walls and this is the bedrock. Over the bedrock we have the till, glacial till, that is the angular material or unsorted material deposited by the glaciers. You can see that this is also ground moraine, and above this ground moraine we have the ice, and between the ice and the glacial sediments there are underground channels. Within these channels meltwater is flowing, and beneath the meltwater and above the glacial moraines or till there are deposits of sand, silt, sandy and silty material and gravelly material over here. This is better sorted than this till. Now when the ice is lost, after deglaciation, what we see here is that those channels where the sediment was not large enough, they still remain depressed in the form of channels. They are preserved in the post-glacial landscape as subglacial channels, while those subglacial channels which were filled with lot of sediments, and after deglaciation these sediments collapsed on their sides and led to the formation of an elevated ridge which is sinus, long and sinus, which is known as, this is esker. These eskers, these are dominant glaciofluvial landforms. They are very long and winding ridges of sand and gravel that are laid down in meltwater tunnels underneath the glacier. They may be several kilometers long, and they may be from 70 to 700 meters wide, and they may be from 5 to 10 meters high, and they may be branched. Now this should be very clear that the subglacial landforms that are discussed under the glaciofluvial landforms, they are different from the subglacial landforms that are discussed under the landform that are deposited directly from the glacial ice. Now coming to the ice margin landforms. Ice margin, these are also a type of glaciofluvial landforms. So within the glaciofluvial landforms we have the subglacial category, we have the ice margin category, and we have the proglacial landforms category. And that are proglacial are dependent completely on the meltwater, glacial meltwater. Now ice margin landforms, they include meltwater and overflow channels. They include cames, meltwater and overflow channels. They transport the meltwater from the glacier into the proglacial environment. Now these meltwater channels may also be present beneath the glacial ice, and those subglacial channels, they will lead to the formation of eskers. But those meltwater channels that are, or overflow channels that are present on the surface of the ice, they will tend to deposit, or those channels which are present on sides of the glacial ice between the glacial, they have glacial ice on one side and they have valley walls, the bedrock on the other side. So they tend to deposit the glacial, the meltwater sediments in these troughs, because these channels are simply troughs that are created solely in the ice, completely within the glacial ice, on the surface of the glacial ice, or they may be resting on ice as well as bedrock in the marginal parts, in the lateral parts of the glacial ice. Now coming to the cames. Now these cames are the dominant ice margin landforms. Just as eskers are the dominant subglacial landforms in the glaciofluvial category, cames are the dominant ice margin landforms that are produced at the margins of the ice, while eskers are produced not just at the margin but at the terminal parts of the glacier, and this may include those parts that are well upstream of the margin of the glacier. Now these cames they are usually flat topped. They may be present in the form of isolated hummocks, or they may be present in the form of broad plateaus. They may also be present in the form of broken terraces. They don't have any orientation with respect to ice flow. So these cames, they consist of glaciofluvial sediment, gravels, sands, silt. They are different from drumlins because drumlins, first of all, drumlins indicate the direction of movement of ice while cames do not. Secondly, drumlins are consisting entirely of till, that is unsorted angular material deposited directly from glacial ice, while cames, they are consisting of glaciofluvial sediments that are relatively more sorted and that are deposited by meltwater, and they are relatively they consist of pebble, they consist of gravel, sand, and silt. The differences between cames and eskers. First of all, the similarities are that both cames and eskers are deposited. They both are glaciofluvial landforms, but cames usually they form by sediments that is deposited on the top of the glacier, while eskers form by the sediment that is deposited underneath the glacial ice in the form of ridges of sand, silt, and gravel. Now, to understand the cames, let us draw a diagram. So during the last stages of glaciation and in the marginal parts of glaciers, especially the ice sheets and ice caps, we can have this kind of situation where this is the bedrock and this is a low-lying area. These are uplands on the sides, and this low-lying area or the lowland is filled with ice. This ice is stagnant because during the last stages of glaciation and in the marginal areas of ice, the ice loses its active character and becomes stagnant. Below the ice, we have the glacial till, that is now because this ice is actively melting and it is no more in a flowing or in a moving state. So the melting of ice produces a lot of material that is dumped on at the base of the glacier and on the sides of the glacier. Plus, there is sediment that is derived from the meltwater streams that are flowing on the top of the glacier, on the sides of the glacier, and underneath the glacier. This is a subglacial channel, and it is depositing sediment within this subglacial channel. So here are these are braided streams, these are supraglacial streams, this is a glacial margin lake, and within this lake, this is deltaic sediments. These sediments are deposited by the streams that are flowing into this glacial margin lake, and also the streams that are flowing from the non-ice covered parts of the landscape. Now, when the ice has gone, all these sediments that are lying above the ice, whether it is in the form of supraglacial stream sediments or whether they are in the form of meltwater sediments or moraines that are resting on the side of the glacier. Now you can see here that these sediments are having, on one side they have support of the ice and on the other side they have support of the bedrock. So when the ice has gone, all these sediments will collapse, these sediments, and they will lead to the formation of different types of caves. Deltaic sediments, because they are in the form of a fan, they are fan shaped, they will produce fan shaped caves, and these sediments that are present under the supraglacial streams, these sediments will lead to the formation of isolated caves, and these sediments which are present on the side of the stagnant ice, these are deposited by the braided stream network. These will lead to the formation of cave terraces. So here we can see a basic difference between eskers and caves. That caves are all those sediments that are deposited on the surface, top of the glacier or on the sides of the glacier, and after ice has gone, this sediment is simply lowered down on the landscape. So these deposits are relatively more deformed than the eskers, because eskers are resting on the landscape where it was originally deposited. So So let us have a look at what will happen after the deglaciation. So this is the situation after the ice has gone. So it is very clearly can be seen that the sediments that were deposited between the ice and the upland areas or the bedrock, so these sediments have collapsed now and they are present in the landscape in the form of a terrace. This terrace may be continuous or it may be broken. So this is the cave terrace. Now this is Esker, as we have already discussed. These are isolated caves. This is delta cave. So we can have different types of caves, but the underlying or unifying characteristic of the caves is that all of these sediments are deposited either above the ice surface, on the ice surface, or between the ice surface on one side and the bedrock on the other side. So after the loss of ice, these sediments collapse and they are deformed during this collapse process. Now coming to the proglacial landforms, these are the landforms that are produced in the downstream of the glacial snout, and they are deposited solely by the meltwater streams that are coming out of the glacier. Now there are scablands and spillways, and there are outwash plains and valley drains, kettle holes and pitted plains. Now coming to the scablands, near the snout of a glacier, if you see the longitudinal section of a glacier, so this is the snout of a glacier, and a lot of glacial sediment is present over here at the snout corresponding to the terminal moraine. Now it is quite possible that this glacier before arriving at this location, at this position, it must have been at an advanced forward position. Let us say before several hundred years it was here. Now when this glacial snout was at this location, if it was stabilized at this location, we can expect the formation of a terminal moraine over here. After this stage, the glacier retreated to this present position. Now the glacier meltwater is moving out. It is possible that this glacier meltwater is not able to cross this moraine. So this acts like a natural dam. Now this meltwater that is coming out of the glacier at this location, this meltwater may be trapped, and this will lead to the formation of a proglacial lake, also known as ice margin lake. It is not necessary that these ice margin lakes or proglacial lakes they are formed only by damming activity by the moraines. It can also be because of the damming activity, that is by resistant rock formations. Now this lake water during summers, it has to move out because the meltwater is coming from the glacial side. So obviously the water has to move out to keep the balance. So this water might move over the morainic surface and it will create spillways. These are simply channels that will drain the excess water from this ice margin lake outwards into the outwash plains. These sediment may be soft. The water running down the spillways may erode spillway very fast, and it will lead to the breaching of the breaking of this dam. Once this dam breaks, the whole lake water, the water present in the proglacial or ice margin lake, this whole water will flood the landscape downstream of the glacier. So in this landscape where this kind of flooding will take place, scablands will be produced, and these kind of floods are known by the local Icelandic name of Jökullaups. Now these scablands, they contain features that are similar to the features present in fast flowing river beds, but on a very, very large scale. For example, giant ripple marks will be present in scablands. Outwash plains. Now these outwash plains, they form downstream of the glacial snouts by the deposition of the meltwater streams that are coming out of the glacier. These outwash plains usually contain braided rivers because there is a lot of sediment is coming out from the glaciers, and we know that if the sediment load is very high, then it will lead to the braiding of streams. Of course, these environments are characterized by high sediment load. Valley drains are linear outwash plains that develop in the downstream parts of valley glaciers. Kettle holes and pitted plains. Now these kettle holes, they are actually the depressions, small depressions present in the sediment of the outwash plains or in the valley trains, and these developed by the melting of isolated pieces of stagnant ice. So during the recession of the glacier, it is possible that some pieces, some large blocks of ice, they remain studded in the sediments of the outwash plain. For example, this is the sediment of the outwash plain, and the present snout of the glacier is at this location, and pieces of ice. So this is the outwash plain, this is ice, and within the outwash plain sediments, pieces of stagnant ice have been lost by the glacier, but they will take some time to melt. So when these pieces of stagnant ice they melt, they will leave behind depressions in the landscape. So these depressions will be filled with water, and they will lead to the fall. These are known as kettle holes. They act as small ponds, and in some landscapes, in the outwash plains, these holes are very numerous. A large number of holes are present. Then this will lead to the formation of a pitted plain. The appearance, especially on the satellite images, these plains will appear pitted as if someone has poked fingers into the sediments of the outwash plains.